Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Needs Some Introduction. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the final episode of the miniseries Task on HBO Max and HBO, I guess, also. An episode called A Still Small Voice. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we go week to week, and this is the end of this particular season of our coverage of this show. But we'll have more shows. We'll discuss that later on, what else we'll be covering in the future. As usual with these episodes, I'm joined by Sona.
Hi.
And Sona, a few things. Oh, before anything else, I want to mention, because I got many emails from you this weekend. Sona, our episode of Task last week, originally posted fine, by the way, but in the middle of the week when I posted the next episode, somehow on some of the feeds, we had a duplicate of that episode. So it basically replaced last week's Task episode with the review I had of Tron Ares and the Lowdown and a bunch of other things we discussed. So it came in, I think it was Thursday. I was at my daughter's soccer practice and someone emailed me and I noticed that was indeed the case. So when I got home, I replaced the file in the feed, but then a whole bunch of other people started emailing me. So and I've emailed back to all of you. But for anybody out there who didn't feel like emailing and just thinks that's just how it was, that first of all, if you downloaded the episode and it's the wrong one, just delete the cached episode and re-download it. Is now the correct episode. I've checked almost all the feeds, all the popular podcasting apps, although I'm sure there's some that are less popular that I don't know about, and it works. Or one more thing is, and I did this for the people I emailed as well, just check the show notes. Our episodes, the original files for the episodes are always on our website itself. So if anything weird happens in the future, you can just go to the podcast website and I will have the link to the specific episode if you wanted to catch up on it in the show notes. And of course, just a generic one. Once again, if for any reason your feed does not have the latest episode, you can always just listen to it from our homepage.
Well, it feels nice in a way that people are paying attention
People
and looking for the
Yes.
podcast and cared enough exactly to write and say what happened to it. I am sorry for that inconvenience, though.
Yes. Sorry about that. I'm not sure why it happened, but as I mentioned, it should be okay now. But for some reason, if you can't clear the cache and it keeps playing the old episode, just click the link in the show notes and have the direct link to our homepage with the original recording. Okay, the next thing I want to mention, Sona, I was originally planning to do this with you, but we went apple picking instead. Turned out I had family plans. I could not attend this event. The Montclair Film Festival is currently going. I have a whole list of movies I want to see, and most of them are sold out, but I'll see what I can get around to before the end of next week when we record again. I'm just muting something. But you did go, and you saw an interview between Spike Lee and Stephen Colbert, right? For people who don't know, Colbert's wife actually runs the Montclair Film Foundation or whatever it's called, and which of course runs the Montclair Film Festival itself. They have a lot of very prestigious films premiering there this year. A lot of them are Netflix films, by the way, and Sony, you probably know about this, but Netflix is building a huge production studio here in New Jersey. So a lot of Netflix content at this particular film festival. But tell me a little bit about your experience of checking out this interview.
Yeah, it was really fun. I've actually never been to a Montclair Film Festival event before. And Stephen Colbert, I think, is probably one of Montclair's most famous residents. So I know when my mom used to live in Montclair, she would see him at Starbucks and she would be so excited about it. So our friends had gotten tickets. They got 4 and they weren't sure what to do with the other 2. So we were really happy to be offered the tickets, and they were amazing seats in the second row. So we really felt like we were up close with Stephen Colbert and Spike Lee. My husband, as you know, is a huge Spike Lee fan. So it was just really exciting to see them together. The interview was really entertaining. They talked about Spike Lee's newest movie, but also just his history with filmmaking and how he got interested in filmmaking, how he grew up in Brooklyn, his thoughts on gentrification. They covered a really wide variety of topics in just about an hour. So overall, it was very entertaining. I think they both have great personalities. It was fun to see them play off each other and just really exciting. As an admirer of both of those men's work, it was fun to get to see them talk with each other.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit. The full interview hasn't been published yet, but I was reading a news article about the interview, which had a lot of excerpts from it. And just interesting to hear him talk about how central New Jersey is in many ways to filmmaking, to like a lot of his history, some of his people who worked on his films in the past, originally from New Jersey. And of course, just for the area itself, New York, he's such a iconic New York filmmaker. But of course, he is now a teacher at NYU. And of course, when he was studying at NYU, Martin Scorsese, who's a huge mentor to him, was a teacher there. So there's a lot of shared DNA there between those two filmmakers as well.
Yeah, and he talked a bit about his famous classmates at NYU, which you just reminded me of. And on the New Jersey topic, he talked about how On the Waterfront is
Yes,
one of his favorite
right?
movies ever, and it was filmed in Hoboken.
That's right. And I think a classmate of his, or right before in NYU, was, oh no, I can't remember his name.
There was Jim Jarmusch.
Yes,
There was
Jim
Ang
Jarmusch.
Lee. Yeah, a lot of famous directors' names came up during the conversation.
Yeah, Ang Lee, I did not know this until I read some of that interview. Ang Lee actually was his cinematographer for She's Gotta Have It, which is so hilarious that obviously didn't expect that connection. But
Yeah, and he
connection.
talked about also he talked a bit about being a lifelong Knicks fan. If you're a Knicks fan, you know
course.
Spike Lee is always sitting courtside. And his experiences with Michael Jordan and his Mars Blackman,
Right.
It's Gotta Be the Shoes Nike ad, which is so iconic in my life. I think it probably is very generational, but my husband and I still find ourselves saying to each other, it's got to be the shoes sometimes. So, yeah, he really covered a wide spectrum of topics about how he talked with Michael Jordan and the Knicks Indiana series that have happened over the past decades and his choke gesture, like very fun, very fun.
Yeah, there was some bad blood back in the day, of course, between the Knicks and Jordan himself.
And Reggie Miller, the Nick killer, right?
Oh my God. Yeah,
yeah.
of course. Yeah, they have a lot of bad blood between them. But now they make TV commercials together.
Oh yeah. I think it's all for the love of the game.
Right. Oh, and that's what I was trying to circle back to. So Jim Jarmusch, who had been in school, I forget if they were at the same time or he had been there just
before. I think
before.
he said he was a senior when Spike Lee was a freshman.
Yeah, because those first films came out within a couple of years for each individual one. So I think Spike's came out in 85, 86, and Jim Jarmusch had put out his first film, probably like 82, 83, which was basically an extension of his own final thesis. But speaking of New Jersey, an excellent movie. If you like Jim Jarmusch, it is a very laid back style of filmmaking, but I love it very much. He's like a very Buddhist and very reflective in his filmmaking, but very funny too, very dryly funny. So if you do like Jim Jarmusch, I do recommend a movie called Paterson, which is about Paterson, New Jersey. And it is Adam Driver is a former veteran who now drives a bus in Paterson, and he's there with his wife. And it is just like this very laid back, chill appreciation of that film. And he also made a great vampire movie called Only Lovers Left Alive, I think right after Paterson. These are probably two of my favorite of his films. And that one is set in Detroit. So again, it's almost like he lived in these areas that are forgotten, but have these very rich histories. And he explores the history through these kind of very much of like a hangout type film. And by the way, Jarmusch's latest film is coming out very soon. And I'm very curious to see it. I've heard good early word about that as well. But anybody who's interested in the history of New Jersey, do check out Paterson. I think it's on Amazon Prime. It's excellent. Okay, speaking of New Jersey and this DNA here, I guess we're more on the Pennsylvania side of this. Let's transition over to our conversation about Task. So let's start with the title very briefly, and then I want to get your general impressions of this episode, especially as a finale. But this episode is called A Still Small Voice. And very importantly, in the Bible, this is from the Bible, everybody, by the way. So this was from Kings, the Book of Kings, 1912. And in that, the phrase itself, this A Still Small Voice, comes from this psalm where it's after an earthquake and a fire. And they basically say that the Lord speaks, but not through the cataclysmic earthquake and the fire and the destruction, but afterwards, that I think it's Elijah hears a still small voice in his mind, which is God speaking to him after the cataclysm. So I guess this is basically what we see here in the context of this episode, we see that Tom internally is hearing that still small voice after all of the activity of this episode. So, as that is a little bit of context setting, Sona, I'm just curious to get your feel for what did you think of this episode overall, and how does it feel as a conclusion to this story?
I really loved this episode. Actually, I often have said when we've talked about other TV series that I've found the penultimate episode, the next to last one, is the one where all the action happens. And I think that was true here as well. But usually the penultimate episode ends up being my favorite. And the finale is more, it's fine.
Right.
I'm happy to have watched it if I like the series, but I usually don't have super strong feelings about a finale. But this one I really liked. I thought it was great to have a whole episode dedicated to the fallout of everything that happened last week. And at the same time, things aren't necessarily tied up with a tidy little bow in the end. There's still a lot of open endedness to how things might eventually develop. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree with most of that. I think from like a scripting standpoint, they tried to put in some action. That was a little awkward for me that they're still trying to put in
The
a lot of
shootout?
action here. Yeah, they're trying to put action beats in here along with this more reflective,
Yeah, that's a fair point.
aspect of the show. And most of it worked. Some of it did feel like they're just pushing stuff into this episode. So there's some action, but I think most of it worked. And I did think that the whole like back half of the episode, which is really that coda of the whole season, I thought worked really well and paid off thematically what the show's been working towards this whole entire time.
I do take your point about the action maybe being a little bit more than we needed, but I will say I enjoyed the action scenes in this episode more than the last
Yes.
episode.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that last episode was very much kind of straining to have a big action
Yeah.
sequence. And I mentioned, and as I mentioned in that, I also feel that maybe they intentionally, and I could be wrong about this, but I feel like they intentionally throttled back a little bit on the edit of that to not make it like so pulse pounding, because I could imagine that most people are going to see this like as a binge. And you could imagine that if someone's watching this, that's going to be like a very high, and that anything after that, even the action in this particular episode, would seem like a big come down from like the just the events of last week and the obvious high stakes of it. So I do think that maybe they pulled back a little bit to not make it that uneven, let's say. But I do think I agree, like that this action itself, even though theoretically is like lower stakes, probably just as many people's lives are on the line here as they
Yeah.
were last week, but the confrontations seem less scaled back or more scaled back.
The scene with Tom and Aaliyah in the house, I was
Yes.
tense.
Yes, very tense. And those are characters that obviously there is the real risk that one of those characters could die. So the but apparently like the body count, not that this matters for the quality of the show, the body count is relatively low on this, or at least the body count from people we know, because there are a few like dark hearts last week and this week that get shot and without any kind of no big hoopla about it.
Yeah.
But the but in this particular episode, I think that obviously all the main players were, all roads were leading to Maeve's house, but going back to that title from Of All Roads. And it's the second time we have like all the main characters intersecting again, right? In like two episodes, basically, it all happens very close together. So let's break down the plot a little bit and discuss some of these particular moments here in the episode. We kick things off. Tom is telling Aaliyah that Grasso's basically the only one that's come up in this investigation. She immediately wants to go investigate what happened back at the park. He's like, look, we can't do anything right now. It's the middle of the night. And of course, this is like a theme we've been seeing that I mentioned a couple episodes ago, that it seems to be that we're getting almost one episode, 1 day per episode.
Right.
And this one again follows that pattern. The only difference here is we do see the night. So the leftover, the remainder of the night from last week. And then we see the morning again shortly thereafter. But this really is 1 day, right? Like you have at the very end, to jump to the end briefly, when he meets Grasso in the hospital and he goes back home, he's talking to his daughters, being like, how are things with Sam today? It's
Right.
like it's all happened in 1 day. I don't know how Grasso got out of the hospital in 1 day, to be honest with you. That seems a little quick for a gunshot.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm not really familiar with gunshot wounds in the abdomen and how long they take to patch up.
The other possibility is that did take days, and then when he shows up and he's like, Tom at the end is saying, "How was Sam today?" But no, that doesn't make sense because they went shopping, so we saw them shopping for those things. Anyway, I think this all happens in a 1 day period. So anyway, Grasso is in and out of the hospital. Maybe he got it through and through, but still, don't you want to give him like antibiotics or something? I don't know. Maybe I'll have to ask my wife if that's believable or not.
That's a good idea.
I don't know how much, she doesn't have that much experience with gunshot wounds, but I'm sure she's heard about it. She did used to work in trauma. So that same night, by the way, so going back to the very beginning of the episode, we also see that Grasso's captain is now meeting with this Dark Hearts guy. He mentions in passing that he's like, "Oh, I've seeded that Grasso's been really out of it recently." So he's like setting him up I'm inferring that they want to set him up for a suicide there. Is that how you're reading that as well?
Yeah. And I think there is an explicit reference made to that. Isn't there later in the episode?
Oh, I think, yes. I think Grasso basically calls him out on it when he shows up at the house. And that same Dark Hearts leader calls up Perry and says, "Look, we'll let, bygones be bygones if you kill Jason." And then he almost
by morning.
By morning, yes. This all happens in 1 day. Hey, they're on the clock. This is the last episode. Come on. Everybody knows this thing's wrapping up. But yeah, Jason, after having a sink shower, comes down the stairs. How do you think this would have played out if he tried to stab him? Jason is a lot bigger than he is, a lot younger than he is. So I'm not sure how well. You could stab him in his sleep, by the way. Probably not the best time to try to attack him in the kitchen at that moment.
Yeah.
But he does contemplate it.
I wondered about that too. And I guess it was like a strike while the iron is hot kind of idea of like, if I don't do it now, I'll lose my nerve. And not be able to do it, which I mean ended up happening anyway. Right. So I think he was just trying to actually do it before he could talk himself out of it. But then he still ended up.
It didn't go well.
Yeah.
And
but yeah, size-wise, it seems like a knife is not the implement you want to go with.
That might have been the other thing that he considered too, where he's just like, "I'm just going to stab when he gets to the bottom of the steps." And then he realizes that he's like 6 inches taller than he is. And he's like,
yes, maybe.
This might not work out for me. Once again, hey, can wait till he's sleeping. But also that night, of course, we see that Aaron's body is surfacing, and that's going to pay off in very shortly. And then we have this sequence there with Tom at the Brandis house. They wake up, and I loved seeing this. I think this is the strongest elements of the show and across this entire season, but especially here in this episode, where the subtlety of seeing Sarah come around to being in her dad's shoes simply by having to now foster Sam just for a day, but all of a sudden being in the shoes that her dad was in with Ethan, and that this empathy starts to build in this circumstance. And of course, we have this whole daughters bonding sequence because they now have to raise this child together. So all of this is thematically aligning with what we've seen over at Robbie's house, of course. But I thought this was really beautifully done. And just seeing how Sarah softens purely through her experience.
Yeah, I loved everything about the sisters and Sam together. It was just all really heartwarming.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about it as I was watching this episode, but you could track this entire season of the show by tracking Sam, right? He shows up in the first episode. They didn't know he was there. He's in the hands of this terrible drug addicted family. And then you see Robbie try to rescue him, and Robbie is a foster parent for him. And then Maeve is his foster parent. And then Tom is the foster parent. And eventually, of course, in this very episode, he has to also surrender him to somebody else. But like seeing Sam's progression to like a new family has like passed through everybody in this show. And in a way, it's a way you could like track the plot of what's happening in the show just through this one character.
Where is Sam living today?
Exactly. Where is he living in this episode? It's very important because he moves from episode to episode. There's some comedy here too. I love when Sarah starts to explain why she can't eat DQ after having a baby. Did it lose
I'm trying to remember that scene and I can't. Can you tell me something more?
Oh, it's just that they want to go eat somewhere, and
where she wants her body to go back to the
right.
Okay.
And she starts explaining, well, these things happen to your body after you have a baby.
That's right.
That's why I haven't been eating any Dairy Queen recently. But
and her resolution was great. Yeah.
After Dad almost got killed and everything, you know what? I think Dairy Queen's the way to go. Oh, a little laugh line here is the fact that when Aaliyah shows up and they're doing their investigation, and she's like, that doesn't sound like college fair events to me.
Yeah.
Not back on the college fair circuit quite yet. And then we see Grasso. Meets up with his sister, who's played by Lily Kay here from Your Honor.
That's right. I looked her
Back again.
up after the episode because I couldn't place her. Yep.
Back again. She's a very divisive performer, by the way. I just saw her in the
Is
show
that
Stick.
right?
People hated her on there. And a lot of people hated her on Your Honor.
Well, I didn't like her character
Yeah.
in Your Honor. I don't know if I had a problem with her as an actress. And I liked her quite a bit here.
Yeah, I thought she was very good in the few scenes she had. And this is all weighing down on him, right? He thought he could do this. And what did you think of, first of all, there's a lot of empathy for him describing that he's suffocating. He literally describes himself as suffocating. But what do you think of his explanation for this rationale that you guys think that mom got some kind of special deal at the nursing home she's in, but actually I paid for it? And how do you think you paid for this house after you left your husband or boyfriend or whoever it was, and now you live here with the boys? So this idea that he has really martyred himself, talk about the kind of religious symbolism here. He has sacrificed of himself to obfuscate those sacrifices to the people around him, but he's been doing terrible things at the same time. Do you think that makes him more sympathetic, that he was doing it for the right reasons? He wasn't doing it for selfish reasons? What do you think about it?
I think all of this makes him very sympathetic if people hadn't been killed.
Right.
Like, I find he's a very likable character. He's very charismatic. This is maybe partly due to the actor as well as the way the character is written. And you, at least for me, speaking for myself, I want some redemption for him. So all of this is good in filling out the picture of how he's not as awful as we may think, but still his actions cause people to die. So
I think you make an important point, which is the fact that someone died here, right? And that he probably knew, you see him starting to panic in this particular episode, that he starts knowing that the stakes are higher this time. And of course it hits Lizzie, but it could have been anybody. I think he would have felt equally guilty. And I think there's two parts to that. One is you wonder, you're setting this guy up as someone who has this moral consciousness. Then how did he get himself into the circumstance? So at least we get an understanding of that a little bit. But simultaneously, it's the idea that, yeah, he's gotten away with it so far, and he's made excuses so far because no one in the end was hurt, or maybe only bad guys were hurt or something like that. And now this is the first time where someone close to him and an innocent, or even someone who he sees as an innocent, was killed. So I think that is when, and he can't deal with the weight.
Yeah, and to his benefit, right? It really is tearing him up,
right?
And he's planning to turn himself in. So I think they're doing all they can to make him, well, I guess by the end of this episode, they've done even more to make him sympathetic.
Yeah, they really let him off the hook here. You could imagine him letting this character die would have been not surprising at all, right? And they really do give him a full, well, maybe not full, because he still has to face the consequences, but theoretically, he'll be having to explain himself in a court of law, I presume.
I assume so, yes.
And in the investigation, Tom and Aaliyah continue. They bring in Catherine into this. Very entertaining. Martha Plimpton is like the MVP of this episode, I think. But they discover some things. They find Cliff's car, by the way, which had to have been like rolled off the road, and they just finally found it a few days later. It's only been like 2 days since that episode, so it's not that long, actually.
Well, they were annoyed, right? You didn't find this earlier?
Like, it's in the middle of the woods. No one comes over here. What are you talking about? And of course, they know that something's up with the phone. Why was the location changed? They prove out when they have Catherine get the phone out of evidence that the phones have been swapped since they don't communicate with each other. But it's pretty easy to be like, how many people are actually pinging on this cell tower at whatever 2:00 in the morning? And not many. So they are actually able to track it back to Jay's phone. And of course, that's proof because Jay's phone was in evidence. So it's interesting that they spend so much time laying out the case against Grasso when it's like, we all know, like, you could just cut to the chase here, people. We know he did it.
We figured it out, yeah.
But they still show us the investigation. I'm like, they could just say, hey, you know what? We know that you took Jay's phone. And that's it. We know. You don't have to explain exactly how you guys figured it out. But they do. And of course, this is so funny when they go to tell her that Martha Plimpton's the one who's got to go get the evidence out of custody, get their guns back if they're actually going to pursue this investigation. And she's like, I know. It just annoys me that I have to get up off the couch and put on real pants. That's
Aaliyah has to put on her pants, actually.
That's right. Aaliyah has to assist her. She's allowed to keep her eyes closed though if she wants to. And of course, in the meantime, Erin's body has floated up and word gets through the grapevine to Jason. And Perry's very bad at killing people. Not that we're necessarily that surprised by it, but his chain, right? She tore his chain off.
Yeah. Did you notice that at the time? I wondered if that was something that they emphasized at the time and I just missed it.
You know what? I don't know if I incepted it into my mind or not, but I remember her because he scratches around his neck, and I remember her pulling it off of his neck, and I made no thought of it at the time, even though it should have been a clue.
Well, and then, I thought it was interesting that it was still in her hands after. Well, we don't know how much time has passed, but
it's only been 2 days. I'm trying to remember once again what episode that was in. So 2 days, but yeah, she had a real strong grip on it apparently.
Yeah.
Rigor mortis sets in, but I would assume the hand would relax first before the rigor mortis.
Right, I would think as you go deeper into the water, yeah.
Unless it dug, like now we're really splitting hairs here, but unless it dug into her hand itself, then it would have been stuck there, right? So, but then that also makes me think about when he panics in the mirror at Donna's house, and I thought he was freaking out because he saw the scratches on his neck, which of course he probably was, but the chain was missing too, which of course is that's a piece of evidence that he left behind. So. And then Donna overhears that Perry's the one who's figured out that most likely the money was missing intentionally, of course, and that it had to be somewhere, most likely at Robbie's house. So they're heading over to Maeve's. Donna hears this and is concerned for Maeve. So Donna redeems herself a little bit here as well. Although she doesn't tell us the
development of Donna.
Yes, she's been helping them out a lot, right? That they're actually staying at her mom's house. But she tells the other Darkhearts about them going to Maeve's house. And I guess she doesn't know like why they care about Maeve, about the money situation. Right. Because the Darkheart guy says, oh, I know why they're going, but it's not going to get that far. We're going to get them before. But I guess Donna doesn't know that they're looking for the money, because you probably don't want to tell these guys that she's got the money either.
I don't think she thought 2 steps ahead on that one. Yeah.
But she also doesn't seem to know that they're explicitly looking for the money. They're like, I don't know why they would have any interest in that girl. And he's like, I know why. Right. Because those drugs and that money, or one or the other, are still missing. Yeah, and then Jason finds out about the necklace. Perry's skinny dipping in the lake, hears the arrival of the rest of the gang. Don't bring your motorcycles when you're trying to sneak up on people. Come on, come on. This is like 101 here. This is murder 101. Come on.
I guess they figured they outnumbered them by so many that...
Possibly. But you're letting them run into the woods, and then, you're still putting yourself at risk, because, anybody in the woods who's thinks they're going to die is going to start shooting in your direction. And
true.
Someone might get hit, and they do explicitly. Not here, but later. And Jason confronts Perry as he's coming out of the water, kills him, stabs him, but in his dying breath, he warns him that they're coming. What did you think about this? That I actually have to say that this is maybe the biggest disappointment in the show. Not that I cared that much about this relationship, but, but I did feel like they spent a lot of time with the whole Perry mentoring Jason and this paralleling of fathers and sons. And it felt like they wanted, they're on the lam here. And that's obviously why Perry didn't just kill Jason in cold blood. So there's a lot of weight on the decisions made here. And of course that he's the one who kills Erin, and now he's hiding this from Jason. So there's a lot of stuff here in the plot, and I don't think it paid off for me. I needed to understand like their relationship a little bit more.
Yeah, I think we're just supposed to take it as a given that there's a father-son dynamic there, and that is why Perry struggled so much with the idea of killing Jason, and that is why even with his final breath, after Jason is the one who kills him, he still is trying to warn him.
Yep.
But it would have been nice to have a little bit of backstory, I suppose, on how that bond developed between them.
Yeah, and like they should have had a confrontation in some more than this, right? Like even if he just said a few words to tell him they're coming, and then Jason's too angry to hear it, And he says, you don't understand. She was betrayed us, and just something to pay off this
Right.
relationship.
Mhm.
And then Jason still could have killed him, but I assumed one of them would kill the other. That was just like really how it was set up. And it's just like, so just a throwaway moment. I'm like, oh, that's a weird choice, I have to say. Not that this show was lacking for plot. So don't get me wrong. I just think that to put so much plot around these two characters, there's not enough
Yeah.
payoff here. And of course, the Dark Hearts are actually trying to clean house completely. It's not only Jason and Perry. They're actually going to want to clean up the cops, the dirty cops they have in their pockets as well. And Captain Mike shows up at Grasso's house. Grasso knows he's coming, has some rap music playing loudly, gets the drop on him. And Grasso, like, he's on speed or adrenaline or something here. He like gives him a Coca-Cola to drink. Here, just sit down. We need to talk this out.
Yeah.
He's like totally manic at this moment, being like, I'm going to go tell them everything. But they do have, these two characters have an interesting back and forth where he says, how do you live with this? I've only been doing this for a few months, and I have this, I feel like I'm drowning. I feel overwhelmed by this. I feel nauseous all the time. And this is I thought this was a very interesting dynamic where Mike says, I used to feel the same way. It's like, you just have to push through, man. And yeah, it'll just pass. And he goes, and when you got that money and you put your kids through college, it all, but it's an interesting idea of, you just tell yourself why you're doing this, and then you allow yourself to do these really horrible things. So I thought this was an interesting conversation. What'd you think about this section?
Yeah, I liked this. I think it might be my own faulty memory with the character that Grasso is talking to, but I couldn't get too into it because if you remember last week, I was like, do we know this guy? Have we seen this guy before?
We've seen him in like 3 scenes at this point. Yes, so there's not that much weight there. Yeah.
And I don't think there was really space to do more with him. So I can't complain about it as far as like a construction perspective. But, to me, it was like, oh, it's the guy from last week. He's back. So I think the content was good, though.
Yeah, the more interesting aspect to me is like, hey, man, I'm you in the future. And Grasso's like, I don't think I want that. That's the more interesting aspect of it to me.
Yeah, good point.
And of course, then one of the Dark Hearts comes in and shoots him in the head. Dude, I got to tell you, once again, these Dark Hearts, not the sharpest tools in the shed or the sharpest knife in the drawer. What's that saying?
Both of those were.
Brightest bulbs?
All of those.
Any of those. Any combination of those. That he goes and shoots the guy who's talking. You shoot the guy who has the gun in his hand first, and then you shoot the guy who's not armed. But anyway, it allows Grasso to get a shot off, but he gets shot as well. Apparently not very badly. Yeah, and Grasso immediately, and of course, Mike spills the beans also that don't worry, we're free and clear. We're going to have money to split here as well. Not that, of course, at this point, the captain is speaking for his life here. Not for his professional life, not necessarily. I don't think he actually thinks Grasso is going to kill him, but it's not like this is going to ingratiate himself with Grasso if he's actually having these moral failings or concerns. But he does mention that, of course, they're heading over to Maeve's house. So Grasso heads right over to Maeve's. All roads back to Maeve's house again.
It's interesting that it's become Maeve's house and not Robbie's house. Robbie's barely been dead.
I know. But I mean, it really was Maeve's house the whole time. So.
Well, yeah, that's true. True. I forgot about that.
Now it truly is Maeve's house.
Yes.
Right? Now she's really the queen of the castle here, but only for a little period of time, because I have a question as to where they're headed at the end of the.
I had a question about how much therapy Maeve's going to need, but yeah.
Well, she's got some money to take care of that, hopefully.
Yeah, thankfully.
So back at Maeve's house, by the way, so she is talking to her friend about what is she going to do? Someone's going to come for this money. So she's smart enough to know that. Her friend is suddenly like a criminal mastermind. Not that I don't think Maeve couldn't have figured this out herself, but I like that whole voiceover where she's like, you take the money.
Yeah, I love it
somewhere. It's so funny. It's out of like a film noir or something. But I'm like, this could have just been Maeve doing this. I guess they just wanted to have that voiceover moment where Maeve is doing the action while the other person's narrating it. But it is.
This girl has been like her quasi accomplice throughout.
Big time.
Sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. But I liked this full circle moment at the end where the friend is again chiming in and they're talking with each other. I like this character for whatever reason.
I do too. She seems like a real friend to her too. She's like really had her back all these different times.
Yeah.
I did get like little conspiratorial here in hearing this and be like, well, maybe if she tells you where it's hiding, you can get it for yourself. Or maybe if you just hang
Mm.
around long enough and she gets that $1 million, you get a little piece of it. Because of course she's going to get a little piece of that. Of course, she's going to help out her friend. I was a little annoyed, by the way, I have to tell you, when Grasso arrives and warns her that they're on the way, and she's looking for her keys everywhere, and the house is a total mess. Okay, granted.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But when your life's on the line and you literally are like telling everybody, like, we might need to clear out the house at any moment, you got to have those keys like in your pocket at all times. That's a waste. Those couple of minutes really were nearly cataclysmic here.
Yeah, and it seemed like she had no clue where they
Not
could
even close.
be.
Yeah, she just
like
under the bread. Maybe it's under the bread. Like, what is she? Where is she looking?
I might misplace something, but that's because I have maybe 2 or 3 places that they generally end up, right? And so it's not like looking under piles of paper and whatever, but she located the keys in the end. And I think while those were precious moments, I don't think she would have gotten away fast enough anyway.
I'm not even exaggerating, by the way. My wife loses her phone in the house 5 or 6 times per day. I do not understand how she doesn't lose her phone constantly at work. Somehow she's able to keep track of it. But here it's like whatever. It's like it's in one of the bathrooms. She will take my phone and call her own phone to locate her phone. Like, she has no idea where her phone is at any time. It's no one knows. It's still in the car. It's in the back patio. It's wherever. It's in the basement. So
it's impressive she always has her volume on, because that's the problem I have the times I do misplace my phone, is it's always on silent.
Sometimes she doesn't. She has it on silent, or it's like late at night and the phone's gone to silent automatically, and she can't. And then it's trickier to find. I have to find it. If it's not the ringer, I have to find it, and I literally have to go into her. I'm like, where would I go? Where would I place the phone down? And that's when I find it in like the secondary or tertiary bathroom is when I actually find the phone, because I'm like, where would I have put the phone if I was her? Because she obviously doesn't remember where she's been in the house for the past 5 minutes. But anyway. But she would lose her keys, and she does lose her keys, by the way, too. That's why I thought about this when she was running around looking for the keys. I'm like, this is exactly what happened to my wife. If she was in this circumstance, she would have no idea where her keys were. And then we have a very tense moment here, right? Of course, she does take Jason to the actual money. She doesn't try to like play any games here. The kids obviously are at risk. Maybe she would try to play games with him or negotiate something if the kids weren't obviously in danger here. And then Tom and Aaliyah show up. Aaliyah stays in the house. Tom almost gets shot, but Aaliyah, in killing her, another faceless one of these guys. There's a lot of these like side goons that get killed, unnamed characters here, the Dark Hearts. But she kills that guy. That brings Tom back into the house, and that's when she starts screaming for help. I got worried when the little daughter was like, oh, I have to go help Maeve. And she goes, first of all, she goes into the house. This is a very weird set of shots, by the way. She doesn't yell to the cops. She goes into the house, and then she opens the window to like see what's happening outside. I'm like, that girl is that one of those bullets is gonna fly and inadvertently hit this kid. I got very concerned about that.
I thought maybe, and this could be totally off, that maybe she was opening the window so people could hear Maeve screaming, because I was like, how do you not hear Maeve screaming from inside the house? We grew up in the suburbs. You could definitely hear somebody was screaming outside. And
I think at that point they've shot through the door. That might have happened immediately afterwards, possibly. But I think like it is possible. You make a good point that maybe she was just trying to make sure that the cops could hear it. But she could also, the little girl could have just yelled to the cops inside the house. I'm not sure. It just seemed like a very odd.
Yeah, it was a little unclear to me. Yeah.
I have to open the window. It's musty in there. You have to prioritize, lady. And Jason made a huge mistake, by the way. I know that Grasso was probably like slumped over in the car, but you check that car when you arrive, man, because he ends up getting shot in the head by Grasso, who's in the car right behind him. He's like looking ahead of him. Aaliyah has a shot on him, though, has a beat on him. But I guess Tom didn't know what a markswoman she was to trust her shot.
Yeah, her reputation hasn't come up with Tom, I guess.
Tom's like, it's too high. And she's like, I got this. You haven't seen me in action.
I have a patch.
She should have been wearing her bullseye patch.
I'm just not wearing it right now, but I have a patch.
He would have been like, oh, yeah, that's right, bullseye. This was a little, by the way, Aaliyah getting out of that chokehold. Obviously, she's a trained police officer. And I
was so tense during this whole sequence.
That was very tense. but also a little unrealistic that they should have made
I
that a
know what
little
you
more
mean.
believable. That if she there's a way they could do it. This guy's obviously not trained or anything. I was picturing that she was going to kick off. She does kick off, but he just drops her. I would be like, if you kick off and she knocks him onto the bed or something, then he would lose his balance, let her go, and then she would get a run for the gun. But it seemed a little, not the coordination here, not the best, but it's okay. She is much smaller than him, so he was probably surprised at the amount of fight she had in her. But this sequence in general was very tense, right?
Yes, extremely.
And I assumed that I was thinking the worst. I'm like, one of these people are going to end up dead. Surprisingly, none of the main players ended up dead here. At least none of the kids got hurt, thank God. And importantly, as the rest of the cops are arriving, Tom sees that backpack full of money and he zips it up and hands it back to Maeve. And then the case resolves. We see everybody's at the hospital. I thought that Grasso was a goner, but nope, not a goner.
Which
Catherine says everyone's just,
I like that choice.
Yeah, I'm happy that he lives, but there still will be consequences for him.
Well, I think that's the point.
Yeah.
Death is an easy way out of that moral dilemma otherwise.
Yeah. Catherine there at the hospital mentions that everyone just wants this file to get closed, that they don't want to deal with it anymore. She also asks if he's seen the money. And he's like, money? What money?
What money?
But then he's so obviously lying. He says, nope. And then he has a smirk on his face. And do you believe this? He says, I don't know who said this. Maybe I'll have to Google it to see if this actually is a true saying. But he says, do you know what they say about wisdom? It's knowing what to overlook.
Yeah, I'd never heard that before.
Anyone said that before except for Tom? And do you think there's any truth to that? Is knowing what to overlook? I guess in some ways that it does make sense, right? That it's like what I say to my nephews, you have to pick your battles. So it's you can't fight equally for everything that annoys you. You have to pick the things that actually matter. So overlook the smaller things. But in this particular case, this is a big oversight in this particular case of what he's overlooking, but well-deserved. Do you think in a way he's allowing Robbie to complete his intention, right? Of getting that money to his family.
Yeah, I think so.
You think he sees it that way too?
I'm thinking about this question. I think he's spent enough time with this, not concretely spent enough time with this family, but observed enough about this family, right? He's been in Robbie's house and all of that to understand the significance of that money to them compared to it's not being returned to anybody it was stolen from, right? It was payment for drugs. So it's going to do a lot more good in Maeve's hands than it will as state's evidence. So I think it's a really nice decision on his part to honor Robbie's better intentions in trying to have vengeance for his family and do something good for his family as well.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things. First of all, even as I was watching it, I'm like, this is the right choice. Because like you said, this is going to end up in an evidence locker. It's not like this money's going back to some other family where you stole the jewelry from their home or something that maybe they need that money for something. Or it was an heirloom that bankrupted another family or something. This is a drug dealer's money. So who cares if they get their money back? It's just going to end up in state evidence, like you said. So this way it can actually do some good. Instead, after all the horrible things that have happened, those people are already dead. Nothing good is going to come of it other than saving these kids' lives potentially. Oh, and the last part of it is I think that there is so much in that moment where he meets with Maeve in the interrogation room last week, which was such a powerful moment. And I think that here's somebody who in his calling previously needed to or spoke to people, comforted them in their worst moments. And I think you're just to assume that he sees the good in her and sees how much she's already sacrificed and knows that she will use the money in a good way. And more importantly, he wants to believe that, whether it's true or not, right? It's the only good that can come of all this.
Yeah, and his not final promise to Robbie, but, he said to Robbie that he would try and look out for Maeve.
That's true.
So.
Yeah, Robbie was just she had nothing to do with this.
Yeah. This is above and beyond looking out.
Right, exactly. And here's a bonus $1 million. By the way, speaking of $1 million, so multiple times people say this is $1 million. So first of all, unexplained here, we had a passing reference from, I think, the cop that so I was thinking that he had sold the drugs to Freddie, but didn't they mention that someone else that they heard that there was a large sale a fentanyl to somebody else, right?
I tried to explain this to you last week, but you
Yeah.
didn't want to hear it.
Please elaborate.
Yes. Ray or Roy, can't remember his name. His when they had initially gone to visit him, when
Yeah.
Robbie and Cliff went to visit him, they were saying we're looking for a way to sell these drugs that does not involve Freddie.
Right.
And Ray slash Roy said there is this one other guy that he knows
Right.
somewhere that he can connect them with, and maybe that guy would do it. And then everything went south. And then when Ray slash Roy's wife slash
Sally.
girlfriend,
Right. Whatever she is, right?
yeah, visited Robbie after everything went south, she said, he was never the real connection between us. I'm the connection that can hook you up with that guy. Right. Give me the drugs to sell. I can get out of this life. You can have the money. Everybody wins if you give me the drugs. And at the time I said, I wouldn't trust this lady. And I think if she wanted to leave this life, she would have done it while her significant other was in prison. And if she hasn't done it then, why would she do it now? But I guess there's some honor among thieves.
Yeah, that's the craziest part about it. I saw the interpretation you gave, but then I still was wondering, why did Robbie go and meet with Freddie, and that there was something else going on there? I think there was something else going on there now. It becomes more clear that she was given the drugs to sell to this other source, and that he went to Freddie and said, I will make the trade. And then when I was speculating, well, was he planning to die? Obviously, without the drugs being there, because he thinks that Freddie is going to rat him out, and that the Dark Hearts are going to show up and he'll get the drop on them, which I think was his plan last week. But then the strange part about all of that is that, not the strange part, but I guess the plan there was that that all played out. The weird part of all of this is, even if she is an honorable person, which apparently she is, she also has these boys that she's raising, right? She needs some of that money. And that's the crazy thing about it, that she would give her half the money and keep the other half. Even that seems to be an extremely kind gesture for this woman, right?
I agree.
And the insane thing is when they're saying that there's $1 million in that bag, I'm like, is there? Because that's crazy. Like she gave her all the money. Like
maybe there's 500,000 at best.
Yeah, exactly. If she splits it with her, that's way better than Maeve is going to do. And it also gets her, she wants to escape. Obviously Ray's in prison now, but hey, $500,000 helps a lot. Does help you escape your circumstance for sure. So yeah, very strange. I just assumed it was half and half. I can't believe she's just like, Robbie's dead, and Maeve has no idea about this connection, and she gets all the money. Wow.
Maybe it was $2 million initially. Is that an option at all?
I think they said they were going to sell it for $1 million, though. That's what doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Anyway, people, if I misread that, maybe it was $1 million total. And anyway, if anybody has other evidence,
that part I don't remember.
Please email us. needssomeintroduction@gmail.com.
Just the most honorable drug runner that ever was, I guess.
It truly is. And really, like, this woman is a saint.
Took enough to buy herself a bus ticket out of town. And that was
exactly. She didn't even put gas in the tank. And then, of course, we have that really good scene between Tom and Grasso, even though this is crazy that he's already, your sister's picking you up. I'm like, that's insane. 4 hours after being shot through the gut, he's going home. But this conversation is interesting, where he asks Tom if he ever gave anyone penance. And he says, I never gave anyone penance, but people beat themselves up enough on their own, which I do think is a theme over and over again, that penance is more about forgiving yourself. And I think that's a really interesting idea, right? That we have to forgive ourselves for our wrongdoings. And that's really like you're the only one who can forgive yourself. And of course, all these characters have to forgive themselves. That's a journey they're on. But it's very interesting that he says, I never gave penance. And then, of course, the gift he gives in the very end, when they go to the court proceedings and he's face to face with his son, is to forgive him, right? In this, literally after saying that he'd never given anyone penance, it is about him giving penance in that moment.
I liked all of this. I'm not sure how true that is in reality. I think some people are very hard on themselves for every misstep, but I think other people excuse themselves pretty quickly.
We see a lot of people in the world in
Yeah.
general, who do not seem to ever need to forgive themselves because they think that they
Right.
always do the right
So
thing.
I like it as a concept. I'm just
Yes,
not
I
sure
agree.
practically speaking it bears out.
Yeah, that might be the case for people like Tom and like Grasso, he does
Right.
see again, and like
Exactly.
Robbie. It might be the people
Yes.
that he's seeing, and Maeve, that he's like, all
Yes.
these people in this world have all beaten themselves up enough. I'm not sure that oftentimes people who are in power like have this chip on their shoulders that they're allowed to do whatever they want, and they never ask for an excuse. They never apologize, or even look for an apology or
Right.
seek one. But all then of course this all leads to that courtroom speech, which I'm surprised. I actually thought that he would have had this interaction with Ethan earlier on. But how do you think about this as a really the culmination of the season? Right, he's him finally being able to confront his son and give that speech in open court.
I think the speech was really beautiful. The way the whole story of their experience with Ethan was told, and really, I found it really moving and really well done. I guess I'm still struggling with how much we needed this plot point to be this
Yeah,
dark. I wonder if there was a way to have some family drama, serious family drama on Tom's side that did not involve his adopted son murdering Tom's wife.
exactly.
It just, to me, feels like one level more than it needed
It
to be
needed,
for the
right,
Brandis family tragedy.
right.
But I felt this was all really well done and really moving. Maybe the reason I'm struggling with it is I would have liked maybe one or two more scenes with Ethan.
Yeah, there's very little of Ethan here. I agree.
So
Even
as
just if they had, go ahead.
yeah, sorry. So as moving as it was, I feel like for the shadow that Ethan is casting over that whole family, I would have liked to have known his character a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. Even if it would just been even a longer scene, more conversation with Emily
Yeah.
in that one, or if we had seen her go more than once to continue that conversation and have it sprinkled in.
Yeah, listen, it was only 7 episodes, and
Exactly. Yeah.
there wasn't much time that I thought, like, "Why are we spending time with these people? Like, this is going on too long." So, I don't think it was possible for them to fit it in realistically, which is where I guess I get to, did we really need it to be this awful then?
Right. In some ways, it had to be awful to some extent. But anyway, a few things I want to touch on what you just described. I will get back to what I was about to say as part of
Yeah,
that.
I kept interrupting you.
Oh, no,
Thanks.
it's okay. No, it's okay. I just wanted to piggyback on what you were saying. But a couple of things. One is that I love it's leading up to this when he goes and talks to Emily. And that's when we realize this is all happened in one day. He says, thanks for taking care of Sam today. But more importantly, he says, thanks for taking care of me. So it's just
Mhm.
finally acknowledging that he has not been a father figure in this time. And it's sweet to have Sam come in here and reconnect him with that, but it also is something he's been lacking. And he does have other kids he needs to be paying attention to, even his adult child, right? She's concerned about him as well, and all his drinking and etc. And of course, Emily's been dealing with that, him being drunk every single night. And he says that it's my job to keep you safe and feel protected. And that's what I'm going to do, which is, of course, him telling her that you're not the one who has to go and give this speech in court, this teenage girl. That's my responsibility. I'm the dad. And again, I think it's very interesting that this, of course, a big theme in this particular show has been like different forms of masculinity and what is it to protect your child, right? This is very different than like protect your child with a gun, right? This is protect your child by standing up and being the bigger person and nurturing them literally, right? He's like a farmer at the end of this episode, right? So it is literally like a very different version of this kind of nurturing masculinity rather than a violent masculinity. But all these different versions are showing here in the show. But all that sets up, of course, this conversation, or this should say this speech in the court. And yeah, I loved all that. I do agree that we needed a little more character development from Ethan. But at the same time, this show in real time only lasts a week. So, like, when would they cram it in? I think
Yeah.
they could have done it by having her visit him more than once or
Mhm.
on the phone, or just extend that time they spend together, extend that sequence a little bit more. But I don't like, for example, you couldn't possibly like be with Ethan inside of the facility. Now you have another point of view character. We already have how many point of view characters in the show? Like it would have been too much to just throw another whole
Yeah.
set of characters in there, of course. So they did what the most what they could do. But the final thing I want to piggyback on what you were saying is how dark this story actually gets. It's not even that, like, from the fact that she fell down the stairs, I thought he was like raged out.
I did too.
And we
Yes.
find out here in the final moments that he was hearing voices and murdered her. And I'm like, holy cow, this is a very heavy thing to reveal in the final moments of the
Yeah,
of the
I
show.
think there was one reference previously to it being like an intentional act. And I thought, like, I think this is a misunderstanding either
Right.
that I'm having or the character's having, that like he didn't intend to kill her though. Like he
Right.
just intended to shove her and
Right.
the consequences were dire. But yeah, apparently
Right.
he did intentionally.
Yeah,
kill
when Sarah said that he murdered mom, and like
Yeah.
in that earlier episode, I thought the same way, that he's like, well, she didn't he really murder her?
Yeah,
No, he
right.
actually murdered her. So I'm
Yes.
like, wow, to your point, did it need to be this brutal?
Yikes.
But when he says to his son, I forgive you, I love you, man, that was very touching.
Yes, and whenever you come home, we'll be ready.
Oh, come straight home. I'll be waiting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, some beautiful dialogue and great performing here by Ruffalo. And then, of course, we have this visual paralleling of Tom is fostering Sam and he's farming with him, which is something we saw earlier as well when he was still drinking while he was doing all that. But now he's much more pure. His cup, his Phillies cup, is actually hanging on the line like as a decoration now. So he's retired the drinking cup and he's farming with little Sam. But then eventually his friend comes by, the other priest, and tells him, you cannot be emotionally available to Sam and to Ethan. And Ethan's going to be a handful. He always was. Are you going to be able to divide your attention? You can't be so, you need to be more generous with your love, basically. Let other people have that opportunity as well. And there's this really beautiful mirroring when the new adoptive family comes to pick up Sam. And he remembers his wife being there the day that they adopted Ethan and Emily. So now it's like, now Emily is there in her place and they're letting Sam go. So it's like another full circle moment, right?
Yeah.
And it's really beautiful. Yeah, he tells us he has to be unselfish with his love, which I think is a great phrase. Yeah, so that's how it ends, right? He lets Sam fly away, using the bird metaphor there, leave the nest. Oh, and of course, importantly, there at the end, also in parallel with all this, is that Maeve is now taking on a mother role with these children, and they're heading out on a 6-hour drive to wherever their destination is. It seems like they're leaving the house because she's taking this picture as a memory. So it seems like she's not planning to come back to this house. So 6 hours. Where are they headed? Are they headed to Canada?
The timing seems about right to go to Canada. And I think I do support them leaving the country, but I feel like if they really want to get lost, Canada's not the best place to go.
You could definitely get lost in Canada, but that's really like pulling up roots. She should bring her friend along with her. So they got $1 million. So maybe her friend will come visit. It's only 6 hours, 6-hour drive. You can do that.
And maybe her friend likes where she lives.
That's true. She might have a functional family.
Right.
And then we end. These final shot is we see that Ruffalo has painted the room. He just finished painting it up. So he's like finally moving on from his past. But what did you make of this shot? There's this final shot where he's looking out this window. There's an open window. And how did you read that expression on his face in the final moments of this episode?
Well, I think I was thinking about the uncertainty of what's going to come next. So that's what I'm thinking he was thinking about too, because he's now created this blank slate in this room for the next phase of his life with his family. And it's yet to be written.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an open window. It's kind of symbolic of that. And he just has that expression on his face that where he smiles a little bit and looks down. And like you said, it's not that he has any certainty to what's to come, but it looks like he is hopeful about the future. And I think that is a very important aspect of this as well. It's uncertain, but hopeful. And then we end on these credits of these birds eating from a bird feed. What did you think about this? It's very cute.
So many birds.
It's so many birds, all different kinds, right? So
I wondered if one of them was
a vagrant.
Sorry?
Vagrant?
Well, the summer tanager.
Right.
I'm probably not saying it right.
Yeah, I forget which it was called. Yeah.
But maybe, there was it was quite a bird montage. And I also watch this with the captions on for numerous reasons. And there were several times throughout the series, but I especially noticed in last night's episode where the captioning said in brackets bird song. So
Yes, I saw that too. Yeah.
there's a lot of water imagery and bird imagery
Yeah.
in this series.
And there's nature. Of course, nature's always a symbol of renewal because of the seasons, but birds also, right? Not only are like there's this
Seasonal,
whole theme.
right? Like a new season when the birds come back up.
They migrate, right? They always come back. And there is also this idea, right? We go back to the poem from last week's title, this idea of going back and forth through that doorway. And it's that these spirits find different homes over time. Like that's literally talking about reincarnation. But the birds also migrate from one home to another. And but they come back, right? And Ethan's coming back, right? And like there's this renewal and there's hope in that as well. So I think that's all part of what's being represented here. But it is very hopeful seeing these birds here in the final moments of the episode. So a few things I want to talk about here on the end that just thematically for the entire season. So what did you think of what might be being said here more broadly about gender dynamics is one thing, obviously an exploration of masculinity, but also how women have these different roles in these men's lives?
I'm sorry, I didn't even let you finish your sentence, but I am really worried about Maeve. Like this occurred to me this morning. This woman is 21 years old. She has taken on the burden of being a parent to these two kids and starting a whole new life for them in an unfamiliar place. I know she's had a much harder life than I had at 21, but I was in no way prepared for that level of responsibility. And I feel like she's going to have a huge crisis at some point. I'm
she
concerned
definitely will.
for her well-being.
She's probably never going to want to have children of her own. She's like, I've done that already. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm sorry though, that wasn't the focus of what you're saying, but that's something that's been on my mind since this morning.
But I think that's the other part of it I was going to mention, not only the gender dynamics, but I did want to talk about what do you think it also says about class dynamics, right? Because exactly to your point, not with this extreme, obviously, but there are a whole entire segment of the population that does not live in an episode of Friends, for example, like they live, whether they live in an agricultural area or in like a former mill town, like a lot of these river towns in Pennsylvania or the Northeast in general, where these might have been booming furniture makers, for example, at one point, but those towns have died away decade after decade as the economy has changed. And a lot of these people live with broken homes or have inherited children from a brother or a sister, or in this case, from their parent or their family member. So what do you think that they might be saying in illustrating this segment of the population, which doesn't normally get a TV show made about, right? Unless you see shows like, there are definitely crime thrillers where there are people who like live on the edges of society, but it's really more about like pulling off a heist or something. To have this like exploring the low income jobs and the economic precarity of the people who live in this is really not something you see normally on a TV show.
Yeah, what you're reminding me of is a show that's very different from the one we just watched. But I remember when the sitcom Roseanne came on the air, right? Which we were much, much younger than the original version of Roseanne from the 80s. I guess it was considered groundbreaking because there weren't really shows about like that lower middle class part of our society and how they live and how they worry about paying the bills and what their house looks like and all of that. So your questions are reminding me of that. And I'm thinking, wow, are we still there? Like, have we not progressed in media portrayals to showing that more frequently?
Yeah, I think about that all the time, by the way, the fact that how many times, like what percent of the population are billionaires or like are in the billionaire class, like these mega millionaires, and how much that gets represented in the pop culture we see, and what a tiny sliver of the population that actually represents. And I thought about Roseanne actually in watching this show, the exact same as you just described there. You think about the percent, like when you're watching these TV shows, you will see people who live in the worst inner city neighborhoods, for example, and the police officers who patrol those areas, for example. But that is a tiny percentage of the American population, but it is totally misrepresented in the popular entertainment we see, and vice versa. We see people who live in this extremely high, not even billionaire class, but how many people are like lawyers and doctors who are just like multimillionaires, just merely multimillionaires, which again represents a tiny percentage of the population. And then you think about shows like Roseanne. When that show was on the air, it was considered revolutionary. It still is groundbreaking when you think about now just telling those stories. And that's the population of the country. 20-30% of the population, they don't have their stories told. So that's what is interesting about this story as well. It's very much in this area, like not in Philadelphia, but on the outskirts of Philadelphia. And these are people who live in these kind of exurbs of these cities who are in former agricultural areas. We see it here in New Jersey, for example, also. But you think about that, it might be a third of the entire population of our state, and they really don't have TV shows about them. So in a way, Brad Inglesby is very curious about this segment of the population. And there are interesting stories to be told here. They have the same dramas that everybody else has. It doesn't have to be $1 billion deal that is the only thing we could tell stories about, or cops and lawyers.
Yeah, I guess a couple of other shows are coming to mind. One is Shameless, which I think I watched a few seasons of that. I didn't watch the entire run of it, but I think it did explore that segment of society, although in a very over the top way at times.
But I think that's a good point. Those are people who are working class, and they even live in regular middle class neighborhoods. They just happen to be like the worst family
Right.
in
They're
that
just,
neighborhood.
yeah, bananas. Yeah.
But you're right. That is the kind of story I'm talking about.
And then another, I haven't watched it, but it comes to mind because of the subject matter of Task, is Sons of Anarchy. But I know people love that show. I never watched it. I'm just making an assumption that because there are motorcycle gangs in each show.
Right. That's very much, that's the example of the show that I was thinking of when I said that you do see crime shows set in this arena, but they are, but that's more of like a crime show, because that is very much about like the inner, like they don't have suburban homes, we don't interact with garbage men in that show. That is a gang that is doing gang stuff, and they hang out with other gangs, and they have shootouts with other gangs. It's really a crime show. But it does tell, it is in the geographical arena with these type of stories for sure.
I think regardless, and I probably will try and think of some more examples even after we stop talking, but so much of humanity, we have common experiences and common emotions, and like the context is just different. And I guess it's more fun to see it in the context of
the extreme
Succession, right?
Right.
Where everything is like private jets and all of that, than it is to see it in a nitty gritty real life context. Maybe that doesn't give people the escapism that they want out of media, but there's no reason. There's so many common themes in what we all experience just as human beings. There's no reason there can't be more stories just set in a different socioeconomic bracket, right?
Right. I think you're touching on two things. One is I definitely believe that these extremes, right? Like being like, whether it is the extremity of being a cop on the beat in like The Wire, for example, which is a milieu that very few people live in, but it is by definition a fascinating cultural pocket to explore. Or the opposite, right? Like this infighting within a family dysfunctionally in Succession. I think that's why Succession is so brilliant, is because it is just about this family dynamic, which everybody can relate to. Everybody has those relatives in their family. And then, of course, the stakes are so high because they're trying to manipulate an election, right? So that's what makes it interesting. But my point is, you could tell similarly fascinating stories in a middle-class milieu. It's just that, like, I guess it's just easier because you say, hey, look, we're on a yacht, right? Like, so The White Lotus, for example,
like we're wearing beautiful outfits, and
The White Lotus is a perfect example of it, that it works so well And the stuff that really resonates on that show is all like just the interpersonal and dynamics that we all deal with all the time. You just happen to have it in this beautiful resort, which of course is
Right.
just eye candy instantly, right? So, but I'm not saying that every show needs to be working class doctors and working class cops. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it could happen more than once every 5 years, not since like once since Mayor of Easttown, like pretty much, which of course, just to circle back to that, that Inglesby has said explicitly that this show takes place in the universe of Mayor of Easttown. And maybe this is why he let all these characters survive. He would love, he says, and I think that the show is done very well, by the way. So I think maybe HBO is open to this. He would love to have a crossover season, like another season of the show, an independent story where characters from both shows intersect, which I think is a great idea.
I would love to watch that. I also think it's becoming a very dangerous part of the country.
It doesn't have to be, again, like something like life and death, but it could be. It's different types of crimes, right? Last time it was just a missing child, although a serial killer got sucked into that storyline too. So a surprise serial killer story in there too. But like, yeah, there's plenty of stories to tell that could be related to this. But yeah, I'll watch it. I'll definitely watch. I'll watch whatever Inglesby does next. You can even have like the characters from Echo Valley show up, actually, like get arrested or something.
Yeah.
It turns out that'd be the twist. Sydney Sweeney shows up in the final episode. All right, Sona. Anything else you want to mention?
No, nothing that comes to mind. Thanks for suggesting we watch this. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And the next thing we'll be watching, Sona, we got a couple of weeks off. We got Halloween next week, but then in the subsequent week, if there's something that pops up, there's a bunch of stuff that's debuting. So maybe we'll have a recording. But I just want to announce that the main show that we will be going week to week on is, oh man, I couldn't remember. It was Pluribus, the new Vince Gilligan, Rhea
Nice.
Seahorn series, which is premiering on November 7th. So we have a little more than 2 weeks before that comes around.
Great.
And yeah, in the meantime, I'll be watching Welcome to Derry, the new It prequel season, which is coming on HBO next week, premiering 1 week immediately after the success of Task. So we'll be discussing that show as well. And other things too. The very good season of Slow Horses is coming to an end. So I'll probably have a review of that. And Sona, have you watched any of the Lowdown at all, the Ethan Hawke show?
Oh, I haven't, and I meant to, and I forgot about it.
They're like 5 episodes in. This week we'll have the 6th episode of the show. There's only 8. So it's a good time to watch. I would say for you, check out the pilot, which is hilarious, but it's very funny. And don't worry about the mystery. Don't worry about following the mystery. The show will eventually pay attention to the mystery again. But if you do like the vibes of episode 1, stick with it because it's a very funny. And Ethan Hawke, by the way, what an incredible performance he's giving. Like really the best performance of his career in this show. So give it a shot. It's on HBO, it's on Hulu or Disney Plus, whatever
Great.
package you happen to have. And yeah, check it out. We'll be wrapping that. I mean, we'll be covering that till the end as well in the next few weeks.
Nice.
All right, Sona. Thanks again for the conversation.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.